The most famous shipwreck in history was not caused by poor navigation. It was not caused by arrogance or excessive speed alone. It was not even caused primarily by the iceberg. It was caused in significant part by a missing set of keys. This is the story of how one small object, a key to a locker that contained a pair of binoculars, set in motion the chain of events. That sent 1,517 people to the bottom of the North Atlantic on the night of April 14, 1912. And it is a story that reveals something far more unsettling than the disaster itself. It reveals how catastrophes are almost never caused by one failure. They are caused by a series of small failures, small oversights, and small pieces of bad luck that line up so precisely that the result becomes inevitable, and how, by the time anyone realizes what is happening, it is already too late to stop. Before the key, before the iceberg, there was the steel. In the shipyards of Belfast, the White Star Line set out to build a Titan. The design was born from the ambition of Bruce Ismay and Lord Peary. They wanted size and luxury to triumph over mere speed. It was to be the flagship of the Olympic class, a marvel of Edwardian engineering designed for comfort and unprecedented scale. Over 3 million rivets were hammered by hand. Thousands of men labored for years to give the dream a physical form. In Southampton, the ship swallowed a small city's worth of supplies, enough to sustain its thousands of passengers across the ocean. The Titanic set sail from Southampton on April 10, 1912, carrying 2,224 people, and a reputation for invincibility that its builders had never actually claimed but the public had enthusiastically invented for them. The ship was extraordinary. 882 feet long, 46,000 tons, 11 stories above the waterline. It was the largest moving object built. But it was not unsinkable. That word appeared in a trade journal once in a context that did not quite say what people thought. Inside, it was a floating palace. For the wealthy, it offered a level of luxury never before seen on the high seas. There was a gymnasium, a squash court, and even a Turkish bath, amenities unheard of on any other liner of the time. But for the third class, it was a vessel of hope, a bridge to a new life in America, albeit one separated by locked gates and class. In the steerage common rooms, the sound of fiddles and laughter filled the air. It was a world of simple dreams and hard work. At the helm was Captain Edward J. Smith. This was to be his final voyage before retirement, a crowning achievement. And the myth ran ahead of the fact. By the time Titanic left Southampton, that reputation had become its most dangerous cargo. The missing key belonged to a man named David Blair. Blair had been assigned as second officer during the sea trials. When the ship arrived in Southampton, a last-minute reorganization took place. Charles Littler was brought in, and Blair was bumped from the crew entirely, removed from the voyage just days before departure. Blair packed his bags and left. He took with him, inadvertently, the key to the crow's nest equipment locker. Inside were the binoculars assigned to the lookouts. This was not an obscure detail. Blair wrote to his sister-in-law, mentioning the key with what reads as a terrible understatement. He kept the key as a souvenir for the rest of his life. It was eventually donated to a maritime museum decades later. It was sold at auction in 2007 for over £90,000. It sits somewhere today, responsible in some measure for 1,517 deaths. While Blair was on land, two young men, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, were busy in the wireless room. The wireless room was overwhelmed. They were working through a backlog of passenger messages, unaware of the impending danger. Throughout the day on April 14th, multiple warnings from other ships began to arrive. Reports of massive ice fields lay directly ahead. The SS Californian even sent a direct warning. They had stopped for the night, surrounded by ice, but the message was brushed aside. The lookouts in the Titanic's crow's nest, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, were on duty on the night of April 14th. They knew the binoculars were missing. They watched the North Atlantic with their naked eyes alone, in calm, dark water. Looking for ice that the ship had been repeatedly warned was directly in its path. At 11:39 p.m., Fleet spotted the iceberg. He rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge. His famous message was 4 words: iceberg, right ahead. The lookout had spotted it with his naked eyes at a distance of approximately 500 yards. 22 knots covers that in 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That was what was left. First Officer Murdoch ordered hard to starboard and full astern. The Titanic began to turn. Every second was vital. Murdoch's mind raced. Could they avoid the head-on collision? Could they slip past the mountain of ice? It was not fast enough. The iceberg scraped along the starboard hull below the waterline for approximately 10 seconds. 5 of the forward watertight compartments were open to the sea. The Titanic could survive 4. It could not survive 5. Captain Smith and Thomas Andrews inspected the damage. The verdict was absolute. The ship had maybe 2 hours to live. The ship began sinking immediately. At 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, the Titanic broke in two and sank. 1,117 people died. Chaos and chivalry met on those tilting decks. With only enough lifeboats for half the people on board, the choice was impossible. Through the panic, the band played on. A final, desperate effort to keep the peace as the world literally tilted beneath them. The stern rose, the lights flickered one last time, and then silence. The largest object in the world was gone. In the freezing dawn, the RMS Carpathia arrived to find only lifeboats and wreckage. 710 souls were pulled from the abyss. Fred Fleet survived. He was rescued from a lifeboat. He spent the rest of his life struggling with the weight of what he had seen. He was never formally blamed. During the inquiry, he was asked if binoculars would have made the difference. His answer was precise. He said if he had had binoculars, he would have seen the iceberg sooner. How much sooner? Enough sooner, he replied. The inquiries that followed were brutal. They exposed a culture of overconfidence that had permeated every level of the industry. But from the tragedy came change. The first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea was born from the Titanic's grave. For decades, it lay in the dark. In 1985, Robert Ballard found the wreck, a ghostly monument 12,000 feet below the surface. Science later revealed that even the steel was brittle. A combination of cold water and high sulfur content made it snap. The inquiry did not find the key to be the primary cause. Speed, insufficient lifeboats, and complacency were the systemic failures. And they were real failures. The key was one thread in a tapestry of negligence and bad fortune. But here is why it matters. The binoculars were standard safety equipment. They were locked in a locker. The key left with an officer who did not intend to take it. Nobody noticed the key was gone until it was too late. A ship with 2,124 people entered dangerous waters relying on eyes alone. The key was small. The consequence was enormous. Disasters are rarely one person's fault. They are rarely one decision's consequence. They are the result of a system failing in 10 different quiet ways until all 10 failures arrive simultaneously in the dark. The Titanic did not sink because of an iceberg. It sank because of everything that made the iceberg unsurvivable. We remain obsessed with the Titanic because it is the ultimate parable, a monument to human ambition met with cosmic bad luck. Today, we live in systems far more complex. We rely on technology we barely understand. The key could be anywhere, in any of our pockets. Among that, everything was a small brass key in a man's pocket who had already left the ship. Every catastrophe has its key. The terrifying thing is that nobody ever knows they are carrying it. We must look closer at the small things before they become the end.